This chunky chenille blanket is the perfect project if you're short on time, but still want something stunning and handmade. This is a simple one-row repeat featuring what I like to call the imitation herringbone stitch. This blanket is so easy and relaxing, you can practically crochet on autopilot. So whether you're a beginner or you just need a quick, satisfying make, I really think this is the project that has it all. It's fast, it's fun, and the result is absolutely gorgeous. And yes, you can make this in a day, and I'll talk more about that in the next segment. The blanket that you see here measures approximately 4 by 5 feet and took me about 8 hours to make. Now, this isn't including potty breaks or a couple of levels of Candy Crush. This is physical hours that my hook and yarn were at work. I used 4 balls of the loops and thread chenille yarn with a 10mm hook. Now, I actually bought 5 balls of yarn and used a little bit of the 5th one for the edging, but I could have gotten away with just those 4 balls if I needed to. Each ball of yarn holds about 250 grams of yarn, so I would gauge that it took me about 2 hours per ball to work through. A great substitute for this would be the Bernat Blanket Yarn because it's the same weight of yarn and holds a similar amount. Now, if you want to learn how to resize your blanket and how much yarn that will take, you can find all of that information at the end of this video. To work this stitch, you're going to create a chain to the exact width that you want your project to be, but I have a really important tip with this. Make sure that your chain comfortably reaches that width. So don't do any kind of stretching to your yarn to make it reach. I had to redo the first couple of rows about 3 times, and I still didn't get it right on my 4th attempt. So just make sure that that chain easily reaches that measurement. You're not pulling or stretching at all to make it reach. For my blanket, I started with 76 chains, but I would recommend, if you are using the same hook and yarn as I am, to start at about 86 chains. That's going to give you 85 stitches. So to begin, add a slip knot to your hook. The tail is in the palm of your hand. Wrap the yarn around your fingers. Go through the center and pull the yarn through. Tighten to secure. That's your slip knot. Create a chain to the width that you want your project to be. Add 1 more for your turning chain, and now we're ready for row 1. Working into the 2nd chain from the hook, add a single crochet. And I highly recommend that you grab yourself some stitch markers. Now, this is a good rule of thumb anyway, but for this blanket in particular, I really do recommend it because for every row we're going to begin with 1 single crochet. The rest are going to be what's called linked single crochets, and that very first single crochet can easily get lost. So to avoid that, let's work with stitch markers. To do the linked single crochet, you're going to take your hook and go into the sidebar or the side post here of the single crochet that you just made. And then work your single crochet into the next chain like you normally would. Going into the chain, pull the yarn through. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. And now you have something that looks like this. It almost looks like a bird's foot. 1, 2, 3. 3 posts. And we're just going to repeat this all the way across. We're going to put our hook through the farthest away post, and then create our single crochet like we normally would, going into the next chain, pull the yarn through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. Now, a big tip here is you really want to pay attention to your yarn over, because if you're not careful, this can get really tight on you, and you don't want that for 2 reasons. 1, it is not a joy to work through. You're going to be forcing it. It just doesn't feel good. And also, it affects the look of the angle of your post as you're working your stitch. So going into the next chain, pull the yarn through. And what you can do is just kind of pull the yarn up so it's in line with the other 2 on the hook, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And you see how it creates a diagonal? This is also going to really help with your tension as you keep working. Okay, let's see that again. Going into the farthest post, into the chain, pull the yarn through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops. And you're just going to continue this all the way across. And the final one. Now that's all there is to it. For your next row and for the continuing rows, chain 1 and turn. Add a single crochet into the first stitch. Here's the chain you just made, ignore it, working into the very first stitch. Add your single crochet and a stitch marker. And you're just going to repeat this all the way across. Going into the post of that single you just made, going into the next stitch now, making sure to go under the 2 strands of yarn of that stitch and pull the yarn through. Again, pull your yarn up a little bit, make sure that they're all in alignment. That way you know that you've got good tension, and just continue this all the way across. Working in the furthest post, going into the stitch, going under both stitches, pull the yarn through, yarn over and pull through all. And just continue this all the way across. Sorry, that stitch marker is making a lot of racket. Notice how I'm tensioning it. If it gets a bit too long, you're not going to like that either. It's going to look really loosey-goosey. Just try to line it up. The more you do it, the more your hand will get to it, and you'll get to that perfect spot without even thinking about it. Remember, if it's too tight and you're having to force your hook in there at all, pull back and redo it. And here's my stitch marker letting me know that I've come to the last stitch. You'll be surprised how tiny that can get the further along you go. Chain 1 and turn, and you're just going to continue this row after row after row. Single crochet to begin, and then the linked single crochet all the way across. When it's time to join a new ball of yarn, it's so easy to do with this chenille yarn. Just remove some of the chenille away from the end until you have bare string remaining, and then tie those together, double knot them a couple of times, and snip the yarn. And be sure to snip the yarn a little bit away from that knot just to give it a little bit more assurance. And look at this, it's absolutely invisible. If you want to add an edge around your blanket, I recommend just doing some single crochets, 3 single crochets in the corners, and then single crochets along the sides just to keep things even. If you're using the same hook and yarn as I am and you're making the same size blanket I am, you want to reserve 60 grams of yarn for your edging. How do you know how much is 60 grams? I just used a kitchen scale. And then at this point, I would go ahead and fasten off. Just snip the end and weave in the tail. But if you don't mind, I am not going to cut the yarn here because I want to reserve this ball of yarn. But when you do go to do that, if you find that it is fraying a lot on you, a little bit of fray check or some sort of white glue works wonders for this. You only need a little bit just to stop that fraying from happening, and then you can tuck that into your crochet fabric. If you're interested in this, it's called a Susan Bates finishing needle. It works really well for these chunky yarns here. I've heard you can find these at Joann Fabrics, but I've only ever found them on Amazon. It comes in a pack of different sizes, and I find these to be invaluable. And so I'll go ahead and drop the link in the description box in case you want one of these. Now, if you want to make a different size blanket, you may be wondering how much yarn you need for that, and I have a great video for you to show you how to figure that out. And to go along with that, I have a swatch here for you. This is a 6 by 6 inch square, and it weighs 15 grams. I used the weight 6 loops and threads chenille yarn, and I used a 10mm hook. So with all of that information, you should be able to figure out how much yarn you need for your project. But if you have any questions, be sure to add them in the comments, and I'll do my best to help you, okay? Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.